Hey guys, so we're moving on to the next unit. Unit 4 is all about solving proportions. So before we start on solving proportions, I'm going to talk to you about a little bit of vocabulary from this unit. So a comparison of two numbers, so where you have a top and a bottom number, otherwise known as a fraction, is also known as a ratio. So a comparison of two numbers is known as a ratio. So you can say 2/3, 17 over 21, or 5/9, okay? A proportion is when two ratios equal one another. So proportion is when two ratios are set equal to one another. So for example, you have that 2/3, you have 2/3 is equal to 10 over 15. Those are two ratios that are set equal to one another, and they are known as what is called a proportion. We can prove that we have a proportion by checking to see if cross products, and I'll tell you what cross products are in a minute here, are equal. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that the cross products are equal. A cross product is when you take the numbers that are opposite one another, that's the cross part, and you multiply them together. You want to make sure that the ones that are across from one another or opposite of one another, when you multiply them together, equal the other side. So for example, in these examples, we have, if I were to do the cross product in these examples, I would take 2 and multiply it by 15. And so my 2 times 15 is one side. And then if I were to take the cross product of the other side, my other side would be 3 times 10. Okay? And then we're going to see if this proportion works out by seeing if they both equal the same number. So 2 times 15 is 30, and 3 times 10 is 30. So this one works out. This is a proportion, okay, where the cross products are equal to one another. And you can do the same thing with the other one. So in this one, you would have 17 times 42 because that is the one across from it. So 17 times 42 would be your first one. And then equals, or we have to see if it equals the other side, which would be 21 times 34. So if you do those out on the calculator, 17 times 42 is 714. And then 21 times 34 is also 714. So we know that this is a proportion because the cross products are equal to one another. Okay? So similar to finding out if something is proportion, in order to solve for a variable when it's written in a proportion, like these couple examples, you cross multiply or you figure out the cross product. So if we do that, we have, and remember, you set them equal to one another. So if we do that, you're going to do 7 times 8, and then you're going to do x times 11, or 11 times x. So if I write this out, I have 11 times x is equal to 7 times 8. 11 times x is just 11x, so I'm just going to write that as 11x. It can be written the same way. And 8 times 7 is 56. So in order to solve for the variable here, I only have to do one more step. Since it's multiplying going on with the variable, I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to divide by 11 on both sides. So if I do 56 divided by 11, I get a final answer of, and this is a decimal, but 5.09 as a decimal here. Okay, so we cross multiply to solve a proportion. Let's try the next one. So in the next one, we have 8 over 17 is equal to u over 12. So cross products. We're going to take the 8, we're going to multiply it by the 12, and then we're going to take the 17 and we're going to multiply it by the u. So I'm going to write this out as 17 times u, and that's because I want my variables to be on the left side, but that is just me. Doesn't have to be that way. And then I'm going to set that equal to 8 times 12. Okay? So 17 times u is just 17u equal to 8 times 12 is 96. And then since 17, or u is being multiplied by 17, I'm going to do the opposite and divide by 17 on both sides. And when I do that, I'm left with u equals, because of the 17s go away there, u equals 96 divided by 17 is 5.65 for that one, rounded to the nearest hundredth. Okay? So when it's asking you to solve a proportion, you cross multiply to solve. Let's try a couple more examples on this page of our notes. So if you flip your page over, we now have this next example, which is again the same thing. We're going to do 5 times the one that's across from it, 8, and we're going to set it equal to 7 times this entire thing. So the difference here is that when you have a variable that is not by itself in a numerator or a denominator, then you are going to use parentheses when you write out your answer, okay? So you're going to use parentheses here and you're going to say, okay, 7 parentheses times, which does mean times, y plus 8, close the parentheses, is now going to equal the other side, which is 5 times 8, okay? Now that parentheses come into play here, this is where you're going to distribute. So you need to take that 7 and multiply it into both pieces. So that's 7 times the y and 7 times the 8. So if I do that, I'm left with 7 times y is 7y, plus 7 times 8 is 56, equal to 8 times 5 is 40. Okay? Then I have a two-step problem. So this is just a two-step problem now. Okay? So when you're working with two steps problems, remember that you're trying to get rid of the adding or subtracting first. Since the y is being multiplied by 7 and being added by 56, my next step would be to do the opposite and subtract 56 from both sides. When I do that, it's gone on the left-hand side, and I'm left with 7y equals 40 minus 56 is negative 16. Then from there, since y is being multiplied by 7, I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to divide by 7 onto both sides. When I divide by 7 onto both sides, it's gone on the left-hand side, and I'm left with my final answer of y equals negative 16 divided by 7, which is negative 2.29 if I rounded that one up for a decimal. Okay? Sometimes they'll probably ask you to leave it as a fraction. So it is okay to put your answer in like this, negative 16 over 7. That is okay. Those are both acceptable answers. You could either write it like that or you could write it as a decimal. Okay? So make sure you pay attention to what they would like in ALEKS when you do this practice. In number 4, it's the same thing. We do have more than just a variable on one of the sides. So we're going to be taking this negative 10 and we're going to multiply it by x minus 3, but we're going to keep in mind that we're going to put that x minus 3 in parentheses. And then on the opposite side, we're going to be taking the x and we're going to multiply it by a negative 15. Okay? So if I write this out, I have negative 10 parentheses x minus 3 is equal to negative 15x, because negative 15 times x is just negative 15x. That's another way that you can write it. So remember, your next step in this becomes a multi-step equation. Once we cross multiply, then we have a multi-step equation that comes from Unit 3. I'm going to take that 10 and distribute it in, or that negative 10 and distribute it in, so it's negative 10x. And then a negative 10 times a negative 3 is a positive 30. And that's equal to negative 15x. Then, just like any other equation, I want to get my variables onto the right side, onto the left side, and my numbers on the other. So in order to do that, since I have a negative 15x over here, I want to take that negative 15x and move it onto the other side by doing the opposite. Since it's negative, I'm going to add it to get rid of it on the right side. And then I'm going to add it over here as well. So when I do that, I'm left with negative 10x plus 15x is 5x. I still have a plus 30, and I now have an equals 0, okay, because I got rid of it on the left-hand side. Now I'm going to move my numbers onto the other side. So I have a plus 30 here. I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to subtract 30 from both sides. When I do that, it is gone on the left-hand side, and I get 5x is equal to negative 30. From here, I know that 5x is the same thing as 5 times x, So I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to divide by 5 onto both sides. This comes out to a nice number where x is equal to negative 30 divided by 5 is negative 6. Okay? So I believe that when you're working on the practices in ALEKS, that they will mostly come out to nice numbers like that one did. And then the last type of problem that you're going to see in the ALEKS practice for 4.1 are these word problems, okay? And what you have to do with a word problem is you still have to set up a proportion. You still have to set up a proportion, which remember is those two ratios equal to one another, or those two fractions equal to one another. And then you have to solve that proportion that you just set up, okay? So first we got to figure out what type of proportion we can make. If you look at the equation, they're talking about Austin driving 320 miles using 12 gallons of gas, okay? And then it says, at this same rate, how many gallons of gas would he need to drive 296 miles? Well, notice that I have 2 miles given to me, and then I have 1 gallons of gas given to me, and the other one I'm going to use a variable for. So if it says how many gallons of gas, that means I'm going to say, okay, this is going to be my x, okay? So watch how I set it up. We have to make sure that labels are always the same. So if I do miles over gas is equal to miles over gas, I'll be able to set up my proportion. So you have to make sure your labels are the same on both sides. So in the first one, I have 320 miles and 12 gallons of gas. In the second one, I have 296 miles and X gallons of gas because I don't know what it is. There is my proportion. From here, I'm going to cross multiply to solve, okay? So remember, I'm going to take this 320, I'm going to multiply it by X, and then I'm going to take this 12, and I'm going to multiply it by 296, and I'm going to set them equal to one another. So 320 times X is just 320X equals, and then 296 times 12 is, if I punch that in my calculator, 3,552, okay? And then since 320 is getting multiplied by X, I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to divide to get rid of it. So I'm going to divide both sides by 320. And 3,552 divided by 320 comes out to be 11.1 gallons of gas. So your final answer there would be 11.1 gallons of gas. So again, the word problems are a little bit tricky because you got to be able to set up your labels so that they match up. So that one I did miles over gallons. Let's see what the next one looks like. In the next one, we have miles and minutes now, okay? And then we're not given another miles, so make sure we call that X, but we are given another amount of minutes, okay? So if I set up my proportion, I'm going to do miles over minutes now. And I'm going to call minutes MN, and set that equal to miles over minutes. So in the first one, I have 4 miles and 30 minutes. So I'm going to put the 30 in the bottom, 4 over 30. In the second one, I don't know how many miles it is, so I'm going to put an X. And then I have it in 48 minutes, so I'm going to put 48 on the bottom. Then from here, we do our cross multiplying. So we're going to take the 4, multiply it by the 48, and then we're going to take the 30 and multiply it by the X and set them equal to one another. So 30 times X is 30X equal to 4 times 48 is 192. From here, the X is being multiplied by 30, so the opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by 30 here and divide by 30 on the other side. And 192 divided by 30 comes out to 6.4. So your answer here would be 6.4 miles. Okay? So pay attention to what your labels are, set up your proportion, and then whenever you're solving a proportion, you always cross multiply to solve. Take your time with this practice in ALEKS as it's easy to make the simplest mistake. And let me know if you have any questions. Good luck.